Welcome to Value Through Vulnerability. This is a podcast that is dedicated to putting the human back into humanity. And this afternoon, I am super grateful and very excited to welcome Michael Gelb onto the podcast. He's written 16 books, has had his own company for over 40 years, which I'm really excited to explore. So welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Great to be with you. Thank you so much.
Oh, not at all. Thanks for joining me today. As we get going, Michael, do you mind just giving my listeners just a bit of a more in-depth background? So, why did you start your own business 40 years ago? And what are you up to today?
Well, when I graduated with a degree in philosophy in 1973, all the big philosophy companies didn't approach me for a job. So I had to start my own business. I had very clear criteria. I knew I wanted to do something that would be of service to others to help heal the world. I also was very clear that I wanted to do something that I would be passionate about, through which I could learn and grow. Mm-hmm. And in those days, I was pretty naive and idealistic. I didn't even think about money, or I figured I wanted just to be able to survive, but I never had ambitions in regard to generating wealth or anything along those lines. It was just about learning and service and enjoyment. So back I really thought about going to medical school, but in those days, medical education focused on disease, and I was interested in health and wellness. They didn't have functional medicine and integrative medicine back then. I thought of getting my PhD in clinical psychology, but one had to study insanity and neurosis, and I was interested in creativity and full self-expression. And, they didn't have positive psychology, didn't exist yet either. So I pretty much had to make up my own path, and it was circuitous to say the least. I became a professional juggler. I trained for 3 years as a teacher of the Alexander technique for developing mind-body coordination and stage presence. I connected up with Tony Buzan, the creator of mind mapping, and he invited me to co-lead seminars with him for corporate clients, and that's how I got involved in applying what I knew to helping people in business. And then in 1982, I moved to Washington, D.C., because I thought it was the place in the world where I might be able to have the most influence by teaching creative thinking. And obviously, despite my tenure there remains a lot of work to be done. But fortunately, I did discover that businesses were really interested, that there were businesses who were genuinely devoted to making the world a better place. And they saw that was just better business, to treat people well, to be honest, to be fair, to provide value, to be kind. And so I was blessed. Right from the beginning, I was engaged by visionary humanistic leaders. And that's how I developed my own business. And it's what I still do today.
It's amazing. When you think back, when you did start, let's say back in the 70s, 80s, Michael, we're still very much in the throes of this old, call it mechanistic, command and control type structure. Yet you really had that vision, as you say, that philosophical vision to step into creativity, more humanistic ways of working. Was there anything further back in your history, if I may ask, that really set you up to think that way? Or was it just your innate?
Well, no, I think there's a complex of things. I think it was the state of the world. Mm-hmm. The disasters of World War II, the Holocaust was all still fairly fresh. I was born in 1952. That all ended in 1945. So that was a dominant theme. The world was, when I was in first and second grade, we had to duck under our desks for air raid drills. And, the notion was that Soviet bombers were going to drop nuclear weapons on our school. So, I remember even when I was 6 or 7 years old, I say, if they drop a nuclear weapon, it doesn't matter if we bend down under our desks, we're going to be vaporized. So, I was 6 years old, but that was pretty obvious to me. So I think anybody paying attention would notice that the world was in crisis, that there was lots of suffering, that there was lots of turmoil. And it always seemed to me, and my mom was a psychologist. So she said to me when I was very young, the human mind is the secret of everything. If you can learn and understand your mind and the minds of others, that's the way to approach life. So I knew she was right. And so I was fascinated by the mind. I said, what is it about people's minds and the way they think that leads to holocausts and nuclear weaponry and having to have children hide under their desks? And how can we change that? And then it occurred to me that learning to think creatively, learning to develop consciousness was really the critical key. So I just became interested in learning all those things, and I'm still interested in learning all those things.
What a wise mother you had to be focusing on that wisdom around the mind. I'm learning at the age of 42 in 2019, literally the last 12 months about that, really.
Well, yes, I was really blessed. My mom was really, she still is. My mom is 88. Just visited her the other day. We had a fabulous conversation. My dad is 92. Wow. They're among the most brilliant, thoughtful, clever people I've ever met. And they're the best. They remain the best conversationalists and just delightful. No nonsense either. They just cut through everything. But great sense of humor, very loving, wonderful people. So yeah, I was really blessed to be initiated from a young age into this path.
Beautiful, beautiful. Before we get going onto your latest book that you've co-written with Raj Sisodia, the Healing Organization, I just wanted to ask you, you've written these 16 books, which is fascinating, including How to Think Like Da Vinci, which is wonderful. Are there sort of one or two golden threads through your experience today that keep coming up across all of those myriad of different books? There are sort of a couple of sort of golden threads for you.
Well, one golden thread, yeah, it's a wonderful phrase. And one golden thread is to model, to understand, to study, to immerse oneself in the greatest minds, in the greatest characters, the greatest beings, intelligences that have ever manifested in this world, to study them and figure out how are they able to be, how is Leonardo able to be so creative? I read all his notebooks. He tells us, he gives advice to his students. I just translated it into contemporary language. Thomas Edison, 1,093 United States patents, created 3 entirely new industries, changed the world forever. The movies, the recording industry, and the illumination of the planet, all created by Edison. So if you're interested in innovation, he's a pretty good guy to study, which I did along with his great-great-great-grandniece. She and I together wrote the book Innovate Like Edisom. So the golden thread is in all of these books. I'm pointing over there because all my books are displayed on the bookshelf over there. And they're all about a study of excellence, of the manifestation of the best that humanity has to offer, genius and inspiration. And the Healing Organization is part of that thread, except instead of just studying the life of a given individual who was a role model for creativity like Leonardo or innovation like Edison, here we're looking at leaders who are helping to heal the world through their businesses. And we're looking at the way those businesses are actually healing the world. And then we're abstracting from these amazingly inspiring stories, lessons that we can all apply if we would like to be part of a more healing organization and create a more healing society. So the golden thread continues in the Healing Organization.
That's lovely. I've heard you speak to and with Barry Wehmiller, who's an organization I follow very, very closely. Are they featured within your Healing Organization book?
Yes, they are. They are. Bob Chapman is, Bob Chapman, who created Barry Wehmiller and is just such an incredible visionary. he's one of the prototypes. He's one of the people who helped us get the idea of a healing organization, along with Herb Kelleher from Southwest. And Bernie Glassman from the guys who make the brownies in Yonkers. I mean, there's so, these characters are true innovators in the world of business, in that they fundamentally shifted people's understanding of what the purpose of business is. Most people, you ask people today, what's the purpose of business? People say make money, which is absurd. But it is the number one answer people will give you. That's like saying, what's the purpose of human life? You might say, well, the purpose of human life is to make red blood cells, because without them we can't survive, and without money a business can't survive. But to say that money is the purpose of a business is like saying making red blood cells is the purpose of human life. It's obviously ridiculous. The purpose of business, as Raj and I put it forth in the healing organization, is to alleviate suffering and elevate joy. To alleviate suffering, of which there's way too much in the world, and elevate joy, of which there isn't yet enough. And those, obviously, the two go together. So alleviate suffering, elevate joy. That wants to be the purpose of one's endeavor. And it turns out, and Raj has done a lot of the research here, beginning with his benchmark book, Firms of Endearment, that when you do that, when your enterprise consistently alleviates suffering and elevates joy, you will be more profitable.
It's really good timing there. So within my own work organization, Michael, I managed to run a 3-year experiment under the radar for 15 international salespeople, and we moved from a more fear-based team culture, whose fault is it, blame,
right,
to more of a, okay, who wants to step up, who wants to take ownership, who wants to challenge the status quo. And we increased sales by 6 million and margin by 2 million over 3 years. Nothing else changed. Literally nothing else changed.
Culture eats strategy for breakfast, as Peter Drucker said, and that it seems to be a factor of about at least 30% of financial return is a function of just what you're talking about. And so and not to mention the fact that all those people are no doubt happier. Part of why you make more money is turnover goes down. People are more engaged. They're more involved. They bring more of themselves. They're more fulfilled. They just do a better job. They think more creatively. They support one another. And so it's intrinsically valuable thing to do is to create this positive environment. Everyone's happier, more fulfilled. Oh, and by the way, you make a lot more money. So once you know that, why would you do anything else? Do you know what I mean? It just, once you get this, it's, because we're all hypnotized. Everybody's, well, you have to make money. It's all about making money, and there's a limited amount, and you have to take it from the other guy. And, the old thing, it's not personal, it's just business, which is a mafia expression. Okay, it's okay to be unethical. It's okay to be a creep. It's okay to abuse other people because, that's business. No, it's not. That's not business. That's crime.
Beautiful. Michael, I am so grateful for your energy, though. But this is the point I want also our listeners with this conversation to hear, is that result that I shared of my organization, that was not the reason to do it. The reason to do it is that people were disliking each other. They didn't trust each other. Like, who wants to work in that environment? So we had a leader that was prepared to have the courage to take the risk on the experiment. And like you say, it's a no-brainer once someone sees it.
Yep.
Too many people don't see it yet, Michael. So what's your hope and what's yours and Raj's hope for the healing organization?
Well, the subtitle is Awakening the Conscience of Business to Help Save the World. So that is our intention, and that is our hope. I mean, really, no kidding. We were we were working on the subtitle because we wanted it to be really accurate. I said, well, that may not be, it's necessary to help save the world. I don't know if it's sufficient. It's going to take more than just our book. But we want to help. We want to do our part. And we do really feel that government is not going to solve our problem. Government is not going to solve global warming, climate change. Government is not going to solve gross inequality. Government is not going to solve poverty and starvation and disease. It's not. And sadly, I don't think nonprofits are going to solve it, and foundations and NGOs, as wonderful as they are. No, I think business is going to solve it, or not. But if it's going to be solved, it's going to be when more and more people in business wake up and realize, and this is what's happening. The good news is, this is why you said this is good timing. This is right in the sweet spot of the zeitgeist. I mean, Larry Fink, who runs the biggest investment firm on the planet, puts more money to work in more companies than anybody else. And his annual letter to CEOs this year basically said, you got to start focusing on being purpose-driven. We're looking to invest in purpose-driven organizations. Now, big money talks, and people are paying attention. He also cited the statistics that for the first time, we have a majority of the younger generation, we call them millennials, the people who are coming into leadership positions, serious leadership positions in major organizations globally. More of these people now believe that the purpose of business should be to help make the world a better place first, and only secondarily to generate profit. So people are, and they're getting this because they have to. In other words, this is not optional. This is not a luxury item. This is urgent. It's important. We're down to really, if this generation doesn't get it, doesn't change the dominant model, the consequences are dire, and we're already feeling them. On the other hand, I'm hugely optimistic because, and this is where all my other books come in too. It's why if you think like Leonardo, if you innovate like Edison, if you have a higher purpose, see, all this goes together. All of my books are a curriculum for conscious leadership. They're a curriculum for healing leadership. You need to be creative. You need to be innovative. You need to build relationships. You need to build your life energy. These are all the things I've written about previously. So all of those are the personal leadership curriculum, but it really helps to have the new business model that's organized around consciousness, compassion, and creativity, rather than fear and greed and anxiety.
That's lovely. And if you think about an organization as a system, which of course it is, of leaders, individuals, etc., do you see, or from your conversations with organizations, that the consciousness level of individuals is also waking up? Because we can't rely on the leaders either, can we, in themselves to enact change?
Well, it's just so curious to look around, because there's plenty of people who seem stupider than ever before. I mean, just shockingly, moronically clueless, and denial ain't just a river in Egypt, and there's a pandemic of stunning superficiality and stupidity. So gotta just say that that's obviously the case. And yes, there are also, so 40 years ago, I was invited to co-lead this seminar for a group of senior leaders of a global technology company. And I taught them meditation, and they had no idea what it was. They'd never heard of it. I had to explain it very carefully. I made it so it didn't seem weird, and they loved it. But it was unusual. Now, pretty much every big company has a mindfulness program and meditation, and they're giving you a headset that has an app that has a thing that you can measure your brain waves and all this. So yeah, there's a lot of people waking up. There's a lot of people understanding that we're at a critical point in human evolution and awakening. So yeah, there's lots of people paying attention, and the key is to lead with a positive vision, to create an inclusive, positive vision. It's part of where I think the healing organization can be so powerful is it's a unifying message for people on the left and the right. People on the right, unfortunately, tend to be proponents of unfettered capitalism, no regulation of any kind, just go crazy. The market will regulate itself, the invisible hand, the wealth of nations. Except those people did not read Adam Smith's other book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, which explains how all of that free market and wealth of nations has to take place within a commitment to the greater good and the welfare of society. But on the other side, people on the left say, well, they throw out, the proverbial baby with the bathwater. They say, well, because there's so many evil, exploitive, greedy businesses who are ruining the environment and ruining people's lives and sucking the life out of society, that means business must be bad. And so let's regulate everything. Let's hand it over to the government. Let's be socialists. And this is proven not to work. This is proven over and over again in experience not to work. It's a disaster. But what if, instead of trying to regulate, and here's the deal, this is what our book says, we're not in favor of regulating companies. We're not in favor of having government impose the principles of a healing organization on businesses. No, this is a voluntary movement. We're appealing to your conscience. We're appealing to the idea that there's a better way. And that's what we do in part 1 of the book. We take you through the whole evolution of capitalism, how it got this way, how it got out of balance, how it's not really meant to be the way we see it acting out in so many. Deutsche Bank laid off 18,000 people today. And there's a reason that happened. And it's because of practices that they've been up to in recent years that aren't part of a higher vision and a purpose and alleviating suffering. Right? So we're seeing this all play out, but between rapacious, unfettered capitalism and government regulation and socialism, both of which are disastrous, both of which cause huge suffering. What if we integrated the wealth of nations with the theory of moral sentiments? What if we really recognize that we could be more successful, like you found out in your own organization, that treating people well, consistently, being honest, being ethical, being open, focusing on creating value, taking care of your people. That's a thing we discovered, is that all these companies, they take care of their people first. Because when you take care of your own people, they take care of your customers. They create great relationships with your vendors and suppliers. And that all generates a better return for your investors. So we're looking at what are these principles, and we are calling on the conscience of leaders to wake up. And what's great is we have stories in the book of people who got this, who were just going along, because they got their MBA and they were going along doing what they, maximizing shareholder value. And they woke up and realized, I'm destroying the planet. I'm ruining people's lives. This isn't good. I don't want to have that as my legacy. I want to do something better, nobler, wiser. And oh, by the way, it's better business. So again, I come back to, once you get that, it's just, why would you do something else? No, I want to be miserable. I want to feel guilty. I want to, that's the old model was you scorch the earth, you ruin people's lives, you amass a ton of money, and then so you don't go to hell, you give it away and you endow some libraries or hospitals. Old model, out of date, doesn't make sense anymore. You can now make all that money by making society better all along the way. Once you get that, I think most people wouldn't want to do anything else. And when they read our book, they're going to get it.
That is so, I'm literally buzzing, Michael, as you describe this, because you're talking about real life examples. Barry Wehmiller's one, my own little example. The beauty of this is, like, on a dime, this whole paradigm could shift. You know,
like exactly right.
All the way, yeah. We're one
exactly right. No, we are like right there. You know, you asked me, you know, what was my hopes for the book? My hope of the book is people are going to read this and go, oh my God, I could do this differently. Oh my God, I got to give this to my boss. I got to give this to everybody in my company. I got to give this to everybody I've ever met. I got to make sure that this is taught in every business school.
Yeah. That's awesome. And in terms of the barriers, again, like, in your opinion, from the people you speak to, or maybe even some of the correspondence you're having now as you gear up for the book launch, what are the most common one or two challenges you receive around the healing organization as an idea, as a vision?
It's only people who don't read. The only people I can't, you know, if you don't read and you're not open to new ideas, and we can't, and you know, they're not watching this podcast. They're not, you know, so there's some people who may be able to insulate themselves, but what both Raj and I are finding is, like you mentioned, I've written 16 books. And when you're getting ready to launch a book, it's really interesting. You know, you have meetings with the marketing team and the public relations team, and you try to craft a strategy. And we're doing all that because we have to be responsible stewards. But I can feel that it's all happening by itself. We had a guy call us up last week who runs a PR firm who heard about the book. He said, I'd like to donate my team's time to helping promote your book because I feel it's so important. So we're getting volunteers. People are pre-ordering the book. They are retweeting tweets. They are putting it in their newsletters. You can feel the energy and the anticipation building. It's much bigger than Raj or myself. We're honored and thrilled to be, you know, on this part of this tide. And it has an energy and a momentum and intelligence of its own, and I'm just thrilled to have, you know, been able to, you know, it's like catching a wave as a surfer. I just happen to be there. Oh, here's my surfboard. Oh, here's this wave. Oh, whoa!
do you know something? That there is that, I can sense that wave with you as well. But at the same time, we should not underestimate the intention that you've shown through these 16 books. No, the time is right for this. You know, what the work you're doing, Raj is doing, Barry Wehmiller is doing. You know, and I love something you spoke about. I think it was on the discussion with Barry Wehmiller, actually, where you said, well-being is energy.
Yes.
Would you mind speaking to that a little bit for my listeners? Because I think it's a really important point.
Sure. Well, one of the, you know, we're talking about a shift of mindset or paradigm and so on. And, you know, the big shift that we're talking about is from a culture of extraction to a culture of giving, that recognizing a higher purpose for your business is the purpose of your business, and so on. So that's a big paradigm shift. Another shift that's taken place over the last 20 years is the shift from time management to energy management. It used to be that everybody walked around with their little binder with the time and took the time management seminar and so on. And you know, so seminars have pretty much disappeared, and so have those binders. Because we realize that you don't really manage time, you manage energy. And I was lucky enough, I taught for many years at the University of Virginia Graduate School of Business, the Darden School, a seminar called Leading Innovation. And the professor that I co-taught with, Jim Clausen, was one of the real innovators and originators of this whole notion. He wrote a book called Level 3 Leadership, in which he states that leadership is about managing energy, first in yourself and then in others. So I've been fascinated by, how do you manage your own energy? And I mean, the number one way you manage your energy is by having a higher purpose. When you have a higher purpose for what you do, you automatically have more energy. So that's, if you're doing something just for a paycheck, you have less energy. If you're doing something because you have to, you tend to have less energy. If you're doing something because you love it, if you're doing something because you feel it makes a difference in the world, makes a contribution, helping others, then first of all, you have unlimited energy. But then having said that, there's all sorts of practices and ways of optimizing the functioning of the organism so that you experience well-being, and then you have more energy and more fulfillment and more happiness. And we know a lot more about that, about how important it is. And so, yes, I'm passionate about helping people cultivate their own well-being and the well-being of others as part of this shift of how we think about organizations and society.
It really speaks to me, because I actually burnt myself out 4 years ago, Michael, at work. And at the time I thought it was the outside world, that person, this person, what they said. And once you realize actually it's all your own thinking, and that's what impacts your energy. Certainly that's my experience.
Yes.
It was really quite freeing.
Well,
accountability is important. Yeah?
Yes. Well, the truth is circumstances do matter. And sometimes we're confronted with challenging circumstances that are much more stressful and much more difficult, which is why it's really good to have some kind of practice to free yourself from the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, so that you can be independent, that you can be self-generating and inwardly free. But it requires a practice. It requires cultivation. Having said that, I know many, many people, I've come across many people, I hear from them who've been through the experience that you describe, where they overdid it, they burned out, to use the common phrase, and then that's a great way to wake up. And like smart people say, okay, I'm paying attention now. I don't want to do that again. What do I have to change and do differently? And that's great, because that generates tremendous energy, because those kind of people, create podcasts so they can help other people. Right?
Awesome. As we start to look to wrap up, Michael, I want to put it out there again. Just beautiful statement you put about, talking about alleviating suffering and elevating joy. I just think you certainly bring a lot of that joy to this podcast. So thank you, Mike. It's absolutely awesome. I just want to ask you, as we look to wrap up, what do you feel? You've spoken about energy, you've spoken about the healing organization. Are there optimal conditions for innovation and creativity, or are there just certain types of things to be more aware of consciously that create the space for innovation and creativity? I'm just wondering what your
Sure. Well, in previous works, I've defined what I call innovation literacy. Mm-hmm. And everybody wants to innovate, but most people haven't studied what are the components of the innovation process. So part of it is creative thinking, but creativity is necessary but not sufficient for innovation. You need to be able to generate new ideas, but that's the relatively easy part. You then need to get buy-in to those ideas. You have to translate them into plans. And there are methodologies for doing that, first by yourself and then with a group. So I talk about the 5 phases of the innovation process. The preparation, where you focus on what it is you want to solve and you do your research. Generation, which is where you generate new ideas and possible solutions. Incubation, which is the big secret of getting great ideas, which is learning to let go and go walk in nature, keep a notebook, meditate, and be receptive. That's where great ideas happen. Right? Then evaluating the ideas and having a rational methodology for evaluating the ideas by looking at the strengths, the weaknesses, and then just what's interesting about those ideas. Right? And then at the decision-making process, which requires a lot of guidance for people, then you haven't even innovated yet. Now you need a plan for implementation. And each of these phases requires different modalities and strengths. So you have to learn to orchestrate a team so that you have the right modalities and strengths in charge of each of these functions. Because it's some kind of people are great at generating lots of ideas, but they're not so great at looking at the weaknesses of those ideas. And you have to do both. Mm-hmm. Some people are great at strategizing and planning, but they're not so great as implementing. But you need all of that if you want to innovate. So I give my clients a whole model of all this, and then I actually guide and coach their work teams to apply all of this so they create a culture of innovation.
Awesome. Well, look, before you let people know how they can get hold of you, thank you very much for that, Michael. Who or what is inspiring you the most right now?
Wow, who's inspired me the most? I say I'm probably still most inspired by Leonardo da Vinci. This is his 500-year anniversary of his life. He passed away on May 2nd of 1519. So we're in that 500-year anniversary celebration. I just came back a couple of weeks ago. I spoke to 9,000 people. 4,500 future physicians and 4,500 of their parents about how to think like Leonardo da Vinci. And later this year, I'm speaking for the Italian ambassador at a special gathering celebrating Leonardo's 500 years. So I'm talking about Leonardo all the time. And people say, boy, you've given this speech 1,000 times, 5,000 times. It's the most inspiring speech. You seem so turned on. Yeah, because if you're in my audience, it might be the first time you ever heard it. So I'm rediscovering it over and over again. So I keep being inspired by Leonardo. He lives on.
Do you know something? But it's so powerful what you're sharing, though, because 500 years ago, and we're in 2019, and we're still seeking and learning from those lessons.
Oh, yeah. They're eternal. They're maybe even more relevant now than ever before. A couple of years ago, one of Leonardo's paintings sold for $450 million. Bill Gates paid $30.8 million for 18 pages of Leonardo's notebooks. I mean, Leonardo is the archetype. See, he's the global archetype of human potential. So his energy, his example is in some ways more alive than ever. And in my book, How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, 7 Steps to Genius Every Day, I've really abstracted those 7 steps and made them really practical so that you get the experience that Leonardo becomes your personal mentor in your life. So yeah, he's still my personal mentor, and I'm his official representative on Earth.
It's so lovely because one of the, I think it's point 7 you mentioned is that my Italian's going to be awful. Connoissore, is it interconnectedness? And I think that's
Connezione.
It just, for me, I think that sums up where we're at right now as we finish this conversation. We are all connected.
Correct. And that's why we have to, the old paradigm of business is based on an idea that we're all separate in competition for scarce resources. The new paradigm is we're all connected and we're all in this together. And if we help each other and look out for each other, we can have abundance beyond anything the previous generations have ever experienced or even imagined.
What a wonderful way to wrap up. Thank you, Michael. So when is the book out, The Healing Organization? Is there an official launch date? September
17th, but people can pre-order it. If people go to my website, michaelgelb.com, Gelb, michaelgelb.com, you can sign up for our free newsletter. We'll keep you up to date with news about the book and other offerings. And there's a link I think it's on the resources page of michaelgelb.com. You can pre-order the book right now.
Awesome. Well, my copy was ordered back in April, so I'm looking forward to it coming out.
Way to go, man. Thank you.
Michael, you've been a joy. I'll make sure your contact details are in the show notes, and let's keep in contact, and good luck with the launch.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Cheers.
Take care. Bye-bye.